My name is James Brown. I'm in my late 20s, a typical age for having a full-time job, but due to certain circumstances, I'm currently juggling multiple part-time jobs. The main gig I've got is at a restaurant. Being a part of a well-known chain, the place turns tables fast, making it a hectic work environment, but that also makes it fulfilling. Above all, it's thanks to this job that I met her. My first ever girlfriend, Melissa Miller, happens to be the daughter of the owner of the restaurant where I work. Melissa chose to work at the restaurant because her father owns it. She never hid that fact. However, the rest of the staff misunderstood Melissa. They assumed she was just a spoiled rich girl dabbling in a part-time job for fun. As a result, they gave her only easy tasks and treated her cautiously so they can avoid upsetting the boss's daughter. Melissa seemed to hate that approach. Eager to show everyone that she was different, she proactively asked questions about what she didn't understand and took the initiative in her tasks. Her hard work paid off in a month and everyone recognized her efforts. Now, no one treats Melissa partial. I once wondered why someone as charming as Melissa, both as a person and a woman, chose to be with a guy like me, and I asked her. She blushed and confessed shyly, "You were the only one who never changed your attitude towards me from the start. Your guidance was strict, but I thought of you as the most trustworthy person." I'm the one who asked, but I remember with fondness when I heard it. Being drawn to Melissa, who is honest and diligent, seemed like a natural progression. We've been on countless dates, including our shifts at work. We were together almost every day, and my feelings for Melissa grew stronger with each passing day. Fortunately, she said she felt the same way. I doubt there will ever be a woman more ideal than Melissa in my future. More than anything, I don't want to hand Melissa over to someone else. With that in mind, I proposed to Melissa, although I thought I won't make it. But to my surprise, Melissa nodded, tears streaming down her face. We decided to meet each other's families in preparation for our future. First, we were going to meet Melissa's parents. Melissa's home was exactly as I imagined, a standalone house that screamed wealth at first glance. The garage was filled with famous foreign cars. I suddenly became conscious of what I was wearing. I thought I chose the best outfit from my wardrobe, but I'm not sure if it will be acceptable to Melissa's parents. James? I snapped back to reality when Melissa called my name. I muster up some courage to counteract my self-doubt. I tell myself that maybe Melissa's parents are not the kind of people to care about such things, as I follow behind Melissa. In the living room we're shown to, there's a woman who looks a lot like Melissa and a stern-looking man waiting. I assume they must be Melissa's parents. I brace myself internally, look them straight in the eyes, and make my introduction. My name is James Brown. I've been dating Melissa. Thank you for providing this opportunity despite your busy schedules. My voice cracks from the nervousness, but I wait silently for their response. Well, it's best to get things like this done sooner rather than later, replies Melissa's father. I respond to his voice and lift my head. But contrary to my expectations, his gaze was cold. I feel the same cold gaze from Melissa's mother, too. I suck in a breath as I realize the atmosphere is clearly not favorable. Melissa's father pulls out several pieces of paper from an envelope and places them on a table. Just as Melissa and I are looking perplexed, her father speaks up. We've done some research on you. What? Melissa regains her composure and confronts her father. What does that mean, Dad? Her father responds with a matter-of-fact expression. It's only natural to look into the man who's going to marry our precious daughter. I heard from the manager of the diner where Melissa works about your reputation. Immediately, I had a bad feeling. I knew the manager wouldn't say anything good about me. He seemed to hate me since long before. I think he was jealous because I was reliable to the other staff and because I was dating Melissa. As expected, Melissa's father looked at me with contempt. We heard you're incompetent at work and have no prospects of becoming a full-time employee. Also, we heard that you're poor and juggling multiple part-time jobs. Melissa's mother looked me up and down with a sneer. We can't possibly entrust Melissa to someone like that. I could feel my face getting hot with embarrassment. Melissa tried to interrupt with anger, but I hurriedly stopped her. Although I appreciate Melissa's feelings, the fact that I'm living off a part-time job and don't spend money on clothes or appearance is true. I opened my mouth to somehow salvage my reputation, but Melissa's father beat me to it. Surely you're not still thinking you can marry Melissa? As I was lost for words, Melissa, who couldn't hold back anymore, spoke up. No matter what you say, Dad, I'm going to marry him. What are you saying? There's no way you can be happy marrying a poor man like this, retorted her father. But Melissa stared back at him and responded, It doesn't matter if he's poor. I'm going to work too, Melissa defended. At Melissa's words, her mother let out a shriek. What? You plan to let Melissa work even after you're married? Enough, Mom. It was my decision to work together. Neither of them would listen to Melissa. Melissa's father probably blames me for everything. He glares at me as if I were his mortal enemy. I get it now. You're just after a free ride, aren't you? Just what kind of family did you grow up in? I'd love to see the faces of your parents. Upon hearing her father's words, I could feel my blood rushing to my head. Before I knew it, I spoke up. I don't care what you say about me, but I won't stand for you disrespecting my parents. As I spoke directly back at him, I saw a tremble of uncertainty in his eyes, but it soon vanished, replaced by a patronizing smile. So, you're finally showing your true colors. I won't let a savage poor guy like you marry my daughter, I instantly retorted. Then I don't need her. I don't want to be related to people like you. With a final word, I stormed out of their house. I could hear them arguing behind me, but I didn't turn back. I walked on, my head still hot with anger. Then I heard my name called out from behind and turned around. Melissa had chased after me, panting heavily. I finally came back to my senses and stopped. I'm sorry, James, for the terrible things my parents said. Looking at Melissa bowing deeply, I regained my composure. Feeling guilty for the situation with Melissa, I was at a loss for words. Melissa apologized again and then said something surprising. I ran away from home. What? I asked back, and Melissa looked into my eyes seriously. I told them I wouldn't go home until they apologized to you, James. I tried to convince her several times after that, but Melissa wouldn't budge about going home. I had to make up my mind. But I couldn't just leave things as they were between Melissa and her parents. I called my dad. After briefly explaining what happened, he told me to bring Melissa to a certain place. It was lucky enough that I was able to get in touch with my dad, who had been busy these past few days, but I hadn't expected to introduce Melissa to him so suddenly. Melissa seemed nervous about the sudden development. I reassured her and headed for the designated hotel. It was a famous high-end hotel from the same chain as the diner we worked at. I escorted a bewildered Melissa into the restaurant inside the hotel. My father was already there, and we were guided to his table by the staff. Sorry for the wait. No problem, I just got here myself. Upon spotting my father, Melissa greeted him nervously. Nice to meet you. I'm Melissa Miller. My father returned the greeting and suggested that Melissa take a seat. He was already aware of the events of the day. I thought we would immediately discuss the issue, but Dad suggested we first have our meal. Melissa looked surprised but visibly relaxed as she started eating. I decided to follow my father's lead and enjoy the meal. For a while, we enjoyed a pleasant atmosphere, but after the meal was over, the mood shifted. Melissa noticed it too and straightened up. Melissa? Yes? When Melissa responded to her name being called, Dad handed her a key card. While blinking in surprise, she accepted it. I've booked a room in this hotel for you. You should stay the night. No. I couldn't possibly impose. But my father shook his head at Melissa's panicked response. It's fine, but you have to go home tomorrow. Melissa paled at my father's words. I rushed to interject, but he held up a hand to stop me. First, listen. I'm not saying you have to go home because I disapprove of you two. I'm just advising that running away from home on impulse won't lead to good outcomes. Well, you're right, but my father won't understand unless I do something like this. After a sigh of relief, Melissa apologetically spoke up. However, for some reason, my father responded with a cunning smile. In that case, I'll visit your home tomorrow. Leave it to me. Melissa looked shocked at my father's unexpected words. Dad addressed Melissa in a serious tone, but only if you're okay with it after hearing what I have to say. My father's words were shocking to both Melissa and me. For Melissa, this would likely affect her life significantly, but she never once looked away, agreeing to my father's proposal. Dad seemed satisfied with her response. Together with my father and Melissa, I visited her home. Her father seemed relieved that Melissa had returned, but when he noticed that I was with her, he glared at me. "You're the one who led Melissa astray?" Melissa quickly glared back at her father-in-law, replying, "No, I made the decision to leave home on my own." "You've been deceived. You can't be happy with this pauper." At her father's words, Melissa was about to retort in anger, her face turning red, but my father gently placed a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. He hadn't expected there to be anyone else present. My father-in-law finally seemed to notice my father's presence. The color gradually drained from my father-in-law's face. Sweating profusely, he called out my father's name. Are you... Could you possibly be President Brown?" "Well, I'd hope you'd recognize the face of the parent company's president," my father replied, grinning. In contrast to my father's cheerful expression, the father-in-law's face was growing more and more pale. My mother-in-law, too, was noticeably shaken by the abrupt change in her husband's demeanor and words. "Why, is President Brown— Wait, No, your last name is—" "Brown. He's my father," I said, pointing at my dad. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law showed his apology all of a sudden. "I am truly sorry for what I have done." My father, still smiling, asked, "What are you apologizing for exactly?" My father-in-law responded in a trembling voice, "For belittling James." "Is that so? I had no idea that he was the president's son." Unfazed, my father began to speak. "Actually, I had James work as a part-timer at a few stores for his future's sake." My father-in-law's shoulders twitched. "We discovered a few issues in the process, especially in relation to the family restaurants." My father-in-law couldn't bring himself to look up. "In the past few years, we've seen an increase in complaints. And it's not just one store, it's a trend across the board. We finally understood the reason recently." My father-in-law was trembling. "It seems that the full-time employees, especially those in positions of power, aren't doing their work, pushing it on to the part-timers instead. Even though there are enough people, the work isn't getting done. What is worse, the management seems to be hiding this up." I nodded in agreement with my father's words. "I've pointed out the issue to the manager several times in the past. The situation improved after Melissa came along, though." My father-in-law glared at me, face flushed with anger, but noticing Melissa's gaze, he hurriedly looked away. Melissa was giving him a look of contempt. My father continued, speaking calmly. "We've also confirmed that you've been making various deals behind the scenes with those people. Is that right, ma'am?" Suddenly, called out, my mother-in-law's shoulders shook. Yes? Haven't you noticed that his finances have been suspiciously good these past few years?" My father's question made my mother-in-law gasp, her face showing sudden realization. Come to think of it, wait, you don't mean... My father-in-law, going pale, couldn't say anything. Melissa delivered the final blow. "You're the worst." My father-in-law was left speechless, looking stunned. My father then delivered his verdict. "You're going to resign the owner. The official resignation order will be issued next week. For the sake of both of you, I'll keep the details private. But if you want to stay with the company, you'll have to start from scratch. Take your time to decide." Leaving Melissa's parents in their shamed silence, my father and I left their house. Eventually, my father-in-law chose to remain with the company. After I quit my job at the diner, Melissa became the manager and my father-in-law started working there as a regular staff member. Under Melissa's watchful eye, my father-in-law probably won't be able to pull any tricks. As for me, I'm currently working as the head of the HR department at our company's headquarters. I occasionally make appearances on site. Of course, that includes the place where I used to work. Melissa, James. When I stopped by after work, Melissa and my father-in-law, who were tidying up after closing time, were there. My father-in-law was worrying about my mood. With a wry smile, I spoke. "There's no official announcement yet, but Melissa's name has been mentioned as the next CEO of the diner. Of course, it wouldn't be immediate, and there will be a lot of things that you won't understand. My father-in-law, surprised, looked at Melissa. Melissa nodded in response. Watching them, I continued. So, I'd like you to start teaching Melissa a little bit from now on, and in the future, I'd appreciate it if you could support Melissa. It'll be tough for her to handle everything alone if we have a child. When I mentioned having a child, Melissa returned my comment with a happy smile. I looked at my father-in-law again and said, of course, if you refuse, that's fine. In that case, we'll ask the acting CEO to take over. As I said that, my father-in-law hurriedly bowed his head. No, I'll do it. Please let me. Surely, there would be things he'd need to hear from the current CEO, as his approach would be different from the time my father-in-law was in charge. But depending on my father-in-law's willingness, he might be able to step up as the CEO again until Melissa takes over. Seeing my father-in-law's determination to face his job seriously, both Melissa and I shared a smile.